Have you ever wondered why you keep attracting the same type of person? The manipulator disguised as someone caring, the friend who drains you, the partner who suffocates you, and no matter how much you change your environment, city, or circle, somehow they always find you. As if something in you whispered, "There's an opening here," but no one says that, because it's easier to blame the other person. Point to the narcissist, run from the emotional vampire. Cut ties and repeat the mantra, "I'm too good, that's why they hurt me." But what if the truth is exactly the opposite? What if you don't attract these people because you're good, but because you haven't met your own darkness? Carl Jung said, "Everything you deny in yourself ends up running your life from the outside." And maybe what makes you visible to predators is exactly what you're trying to hide. Your fear of saying no, your addiction to being accepted, your performance of being spiritually evolved, your emotional dependency disguised as empathy. This video isn't about feel-good quotes. It's about walking through the mirror and stopping the bleeding in places no one ever asked you to get hurt. If you have the courage to face that, stay till the end, because what you'll discover here might forever silence the kind of presence that once hurt you most. Toxic people don't choose their victims at random. They sense emotional cracks the way predators smell blood. What makes someone a target isn't their kindness, sensitivity, or pure heart. It's the absence of psychic integrity. It's the gap between what you show and what you truly feel. Carl Jung said that what you deny in yourself enslaves you from the unconscious. And that denial shines like neon to those who thrive on manipulation. Spirituality teaches us that everything outside is a reflection of what vibrates within. And those who haven't integrated their pain radiate insecurity disguised as sweetness, fear masked as kindness, submission pretending to be empathy. And predators pick up on that. Wordlessly, effortlessly, they know exactly which button to push, what tone to use, what kind of silence to offer. They don't need to know you. They just need to feel where you betray yourself. This psychic visibility is almost energetic. It's not in what you say, it's in what you avoid saying. It lives in your body, in the tension in your shoulders, in the hesitation in your voice, in the way you smile while swallowing your anger. It's a type of vulnerability that has no scent but emits a vibration. And those used to surviving in darkness learn to detect that vibration in the air. People who live to manipulate don't seek confrontation, they seek entry points. And you become an entry point when you carry within you a desperate need to be accepted. The persona, that social mask the ego creates to secure emotional survival, is easily detected by those who dwell in the shadows, because it trembles, because it begs, because it exposes. Shadow work is what strengthens your foundation. Without it, your outward image is just a facade, an open temple waiting to be emotionally desecrated. Want to become invisible to predators? Stop negotiating with your own conscience. The outer world responds to what you accept within. People who are emotionally grounded aren't cold, they're whole. And when you're whole, you don't need to defend yourself. Your presence becomes your shield. Carl Jung called this self-integration, a state where the ego no longer commands and the shadow no longer dominates. There's solidity, and solidity doesn't vibrate like weakness. That's why some people walk into any room and aren't even noticed by manipulators. They emit no cracks, no leaks, no pleas, and that disarms them. The predator looks and sees a smooth stone, no crack to dig into. But this requires a step back, because as long as you keep projecting your shadow onto others, you'll remain fertile ground for those who want to exploit you. And that's what we're about to talk about next. Toxic people don't choose their victims based on looks, kindness, or intelligence. They choose based on psychic scent, on the invisible trail left behind by a wounded ego trying to pretend everything's okay. Carl Jung explained that an unintegrated shadow expresses itself in the subtext, in gestures, in the uncomfortable silence of someone saying yes when they really want to scream no. Gee. And that's what predators pick up on, the emotional void you try to cover with politeness, charm, or over-the-top empathy. It's like your energy field flashes a warning. There's a crack here. It doesn't matter if you're kind, spiritual, or self-aware. If your wound is open, it will emit something that can't be hidden behind good intentions. And those who dwell in the shadows don't need to know your story. They just need to smell your neediness, hear your fear, sense the shape of your guilt. This psychic visibility isn't logical, it's instinctual, like an unconscious radar. Manipulative people can sense when you crave acceptance, when you fear rejection, when you're still a hostage to the persona you built to survive. And the more you try to cover it up with pretty phrases, the more exposed you become. Spirituality without shadow work is just light makeup, and the ego loves that performance. It fakes self-awareness while trembling inside. People with this emotional gap become palatable to those who feed on control, drama, and tension. Ever notice how certain types of abusers keep showing up in your life? They don't change because you're still vibrating on the same frequency. And as long as you try to fix the outside world without cleansing your inner vibration, you'll keep acting as a psychic magnet for the same kind of presence, just with different names and faces. Becoming invisible to emotional predators isn't about hiding, it's about not sending out invitations. And by invitation, I mean any part of you that screams, "Please see me, choose me, validate me." Someone who is whole doesn't need any of that. Presence speaks. Vibration silences. People who've integrated ego and shadow, as Jung taught through individuation, begin to radiate a kind of solidity that disarms predators. They look and see no space. And since shadow recognizes shadow, they realize there's a consciousness here far too awake to be fooled. This strength doesn't come from motivational quotes. It comes from inner stillness, from self-awareness that has bled. But as long as you keep blaming others without looking at what within you still plays the game, you'll remain visible. And now, we begin dissecting the real mechanism behind this trap: projection. Most people go to war with the world without realizing they're actually fighting themselves. Carl Jung revealed a truth few are ready to face. Everything you refuse to see in yourself, you project onto others. And projection acts like a silent poison. It makes you hate people who carry a trait you've repressed in yourself. You call out the manipulator, but fear admitting that you too know how to manipulate. You condemn the aggressive one, but you've never faced your own buried anger. And the cruelest part? As long as you keep pointing fingers, you'll stay blind to the mirror. Spirituality doesn't demand purity, it demands responsibility. And the ego that avoids shadow work becomes a slave to its own distortions. With every new projection, you give away your power, and without realizing it, you become easy prey for those who know how to exploit your open wounds. Projection is subtle and sneaky. It hides behind a sense of justice, reason, even kindness. But behind the excessive criticism, the outrage, the disgust, there's usually a part of you begging to be seen. The people who deeply irritate you, spark hatred, or even an unexplained fascination, they're symbolic portals into your unconscious. They reveal something you denied in yourself out of fear, shame, or guilt, and the more you deny it, the more they show up. The persona, that mask your ego built to survive, can't hide what still pulses inside. And psychic predators pick up on exactly that. What you fight to hide, they exploit to dominate. That's why cutting people off without doing the inner work is pointless. The face changes, the script repeats, until you stop trying to kill the mirror and finally start looking into it. The only way to break this cycle is brutal honesty. Observe your emotional triggers with the same calm precision you'd use to dissect a wound. No drama, no excuses. just recognition of what still lives in the shadow. Shadow work begins the moment you admit, yes, I can be cruel too. Yes, I crave power too. Yes, I manipulate too, even if I don't notice. And it's in that act of courage that you begin pulling back everything you've thrown out into the world. And as you do, your energy shifts. You stop vibrating as a victim and start vibrating as someone who sees themselves. And those who see themselves get quiet. And those who get quiet become unsettling. Predators don't hunt the whole, they hunt the fragmented. But before you can shield yourself, you need to break free from the most addictive emotional trap, drama. And that's where the ego loves to play the most. Drama is the wounded ego's favorite theater. It's the most effective way it knows how to stay relevant, to feel in control, even while bleeding inside. It's a scream disguised as conversation. A cry for help masked in attacks, justifications, tears, and loud silences. Carl Jung knew the unconscious always wants to be heard, and when it's not heard in the quiet of the soul, it screams through behavior, especially through reactivity. Drama begins when you believe you have something to prove, that you must be understood, that you must be validated. That's when you enter the game. They provoke you. You react. They twist your words, you explain. They manipulate, you lose your grip. And just like that, the match begins. What seems like a difficult conversation is actually a symbolic battlefield. And those who feed on chaos win the moment you lose your composure. The manipulator doesn't want your clarity. They want your confusion. They want your desperation. They want to watch you try to fix what they deliberately broke. And you, with your heart bleeding, give them exactly what they crave: emotional energy, the most valuable currency of the unconscious. The game is sophisticated because it feels familiar. It echoes childhood arguments, unresolved fights with your parents, dynamics you never fully understood but that shaped you. That's why you don't recognize the game. You live it as if it were part of who you are. And that's when drama becomes addiction. You're not just arguing with someone, you're arguing with ghosts, with emotional memories that still live inside you. And here's the most brutal part. The manipulator in front of you is just an actor, playing out a script your shadow wrote years ago. Spirituality doesn't want your performance, it wants your awareness. And as long as you keep reacting to the other person's cues, you're just reinforcing the pain you carry. Silence in this context isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the choice not to drown in someone else's mud. But the ego hates that. It wants a comeback. It wants revenge. It wants to prove it's right, and that's exactly where you lose. Because emotional predators don't feed off what you say. They feed off how you feel while you're saying it. Neutrality is what breaks the cycle. But don't get it twisted. It's not the robotic silence of someone trying to keep the peace. It's the living neutrality of someone who sees everything and chooses not to engage. Carl Jung called this the withdrawal of projection. When you realize that the only reason this person throws you off balance is because they touch a wound you haven't healed, something inside you begins to shift. You stop fighting the messenger and start reading the message. Neutrality means not giving them a stage, not giving them a script. It's stepping out of the dance even when the music is blaring. And that takes a kind of strength you won't learn from books, but from facing yourself. People will call you cold, insensitive, arrogant. But it's in that judgment that you test the integrity of your presence. And when you can hold your silence without guilt, you become untouchable. But to hold that internal space, you need deep roots. You need boundaries that aren't just words, but structures. And those boundaries, the ones no one sees, are what we're going to build next. There's a kind of protection that doesn't make noise. It doesn't come from physical strength, sharp comebacks, or veiled threats. It comes from somewhere deeper and much rarer, Carl Jung called it psychic integrity. It's the inner state of someone who doesn't need to perform confidence because they are confident, who doesn't need to say, "I respect myself," because that's already the frequency they emit. And this kind of energy can't be faked, can't be staged. It's built in the silence of shadow work, when the ego stops begging for approval and begins to bow before inner truth. Psychic integrity isn't about appearing strong, it's about being whole. When you're whole, there are no cracks for chaos to sneak through. The manipulator looks, tries, analyzes, but finds no entry point, and what has no opening cannot be invaded. People like this don't need to defend themselves because their energy already communicates, "I'm not available." This integrity doesn't come from motivational quotes or feel-good videos. It's forged in the fire of everything you've tried to hide your whole life. It's built every time you choose yourself, when the world expects you to abandon yourself. Every time you say no without over-explaining. Every time you hold your ground even when misunderstood. Every time you don't try to justify yourself to keep the love of someone who's hurting you. This emotional frequency becomes a kind of vibrational field around you. And those who live off manipulation, they feel it. They sense it, and they step back because they realize you're not going to bend, react, or break just to fit into someone else's script. People with psychic integrity don't live on edge. They live in peace. But it's a solid peace, a peace that runs deep. Not the kind that denies anger, but the kind that's already made peace with it. Not the kind that fakes forgiveness, but the kind that's already integrated pain. And that peace terrifies those who only know how to live in war. The ego hates this path, because psychic integrity requires loss. It asks you to let go of shallow relationships, social roles, superficial praise. It asks you to be misunderstood, doubted, left behind. But the moment you accept that, something shifts inside. The ego stops screaming, the shadow stops leaking, and the self begins to rise, that inner center that knows who you are, even when the world doesn't. Jung said the self doesn't need to prove itself, it simply is. And when that center is active, everything around you begins to reorganize. Relationships change, environments shift, even your posture transforms, because you're no longer trying to survive, you're finally inhabiting your essence. But for that to happen, you need to build something no one can see but everyone can feel. Invisible, non-negotiable boundaries. Not walls of defense, roots of identity. And that's exactly what we need to cultivate now. Want to learn how to protect yourself from toxic people? Then stop focusing on them. The problem isn't the one who invades you. It's you who still leaves the door open. And that door isn't in what you say. It's in what you feel. It's in your need to be seen as good, fair, spiritual. It's in your fear of conflict, judgment, rejection. Carl Jung said the shadow rules your life when you refuse to face it. And the truth is, you still want to be liked. You want people to approve of you. You want to leave every conversation feeling validated, but the manipulator senses that and uses it. Every silence you swallow, every "it's fine" you say while falling apart inside, every apology you make just to keep the peace. That's the crack. That's vulnerability disguised as politeness. You don't set boundaries, you beg to be respected. And that will never work. The most powerful boundaries aren't the ones you say, they're the ones you embody. They don't live in words, they live in your energy, and that starts on the inside. Have you ever said no internally before saying it out loud? Have you ever felt your own desire as an unshakable authority? Or are you still negotiating your peace to avoid discomfort? Internal boundaries are when you know you can lose someone and still choose to stay true to yourself. When you don't feel the need to explain your choices. When you don't twist yourself to fit in. When you don't beg for love, accept crumbs, or silence your soul out of fear of being alone. That's strength, that's embodied spirituality. But it only starts when you stop romanticizing love friendship, acceptance. You weren't made to be liked by everyone, and if you still need that, you'll keep submitting to the game of those who offer affection as a currency of control. Now answer me with brutal honesty. How long will you keep saying yes to people who tear you up inside? How long will you keep smiling when you feel like disappearing? How long will you play the nice one just to avoid being rejected? Internal boundaries are built when you begin to choose yourself, even when it hurts, because in the beginning it will hurt. There'll be guilt, fear, doubt. You'll think you're being selfish, that you're overreacting, that you're closing your heart. But that's a lie. You're not closing off. You're finally holding yourself in, stopping the emotional leakage for people who were never even thirsty. Jung would say, the ego molds itself to survive, but the self stands firm to exist. So the question isn't whether you can set boundaries. The question is, are you willing to deal with the consequences of being true to yourself? Because if you are, you'll start to see the world reorganize around you. But to get there, there's still one more step. The darkest one, the most feared, and maybe the most liberating. This is where most people quit. Integrating the shadow isn't a poetic metaphor for self-awareness. It's a naked dive into what you've spent your whole life trying to hide. Carl Jung was clear. Until you know your own darkness, you will be ruled by it. And the cruelest part? It will use your good person image as camouflage. It will hide in your forced altruism, your exhausted compassion, your fear of being seen as selfish. Facing the shadow is hard because it holds everything you swore you'd never be: manipulative, jealous, controlling, cruel. But you've already been all of that, in thought. You've wished someone pain. You've felt satisfaction when someone who hurt you fell. You've lied to seem better. The shadow is real, and as long as you reject it, anyone can use it against you. You wonder why criticism still shakes you, why you still lose it when someone points something out, because deep down, you're still trying to convince the world and yourself that you're better than you really are. And that weakens you. It makes you dependent on approval, vulnerable to judgment, a hostage to your own image. Now listen closely. You're not going to find freedom by trying to be perfect. You'll find freedom by accepting you're imperfect and still worthy of existing. Shadow work isn't about becoming a saint. It's about stopping the act that you already are one. When you recognize your darker parts, no one can weaponize them against you. They call you manipulative. You've already seen that side. They accuse you of being aggressive. You've already spoken to that rage, and that disarms the world. The power of self-awareness is silent and absolute. The shadow also holds what's beautiful, powerful, and creative in you. It's not just pain you buried, it's strength, it's courage, it's instinct, it's voice. Many who stay silent today are former children who learned that being too much was dangerous, that speaking loudly was wrong, that wanting too much was a sin. So they buried it all. But what you bury comes back. It returns as pain in the body, anxiety attacks, suffocating relationships. It returns as guilt with no cause, exhaustion that never lifts. Integrating the shadow is opening your soul's chest and facing what's still inside, even the precious things. You're not just light, and trying to be only light will make you sick. It will make you a target. It will make you dependent on people who fake acceptance while feeding on your repression. So now answer without hiding, what in you is still unacceptable? What part of your soul do you hide even from yourself? The ego will want to run from this question. It'll rationalize, minimize, claim you've already healed. But you haven't, you just buried it. And while it's buried, it will keep controlling your reactions, your choices, your relationships. Jung said, what you don't bring to consciousness becomes your fate. And if you don't want to keep attracting the same pain over and over again, you have to start here, with the darkness that is yours, with the monster you need to stare in the eyes to finally tame. And once that encounter happens, Your energy shifts, but it's not the end, it's the beginning. Because the final step isn't just accepting the shadow, it's transcending the fear that it might destroy you. That's when it stops screaming and starts serving you. To transcend the shadow is to walk through your own hell without getting burned. It's not pretending to be light or chanting mantras to convince yourself everything's okay. It's staring into the abyss you've always avoided, stepping into it with steady feet and saying, I know who you are, and I no longer run from myself. Carl Jung didn't ask us to be pure. He asked for wholeness. He knew real spirituality begins when the ego stops dominating and the shadow stops threatening. The self, that quiet center of consciousness, only emerges when the psyche stops fighting itself. And what happens then? You stop bleeding where you once begged for crumbs. You fall silent where you once over-explained. You become an energy field that repels everything that needs your fragmentation to survive. And the predators? They notice, they sniff, they test, but they back off. Because now there's something in you that doesn't bend, not even when it bleeds. And here's the most brutal truth. This transformation doesn't come with applause or external rewards. It comes with loss, with silence, with the symbolic death of everything that upheld your wounded identity. When you stop living from the need to be seen, a lot of things disappear. Friends vanish, partners pull away, jobs that once seemed important lose all meaning, and your mind panics. But if you hold on, the collapse becomes rebirth. What remains is real. What stays resonates on your new frequency, and then you realize it wasn't the world that was cruel. It was you still feeding off your own lack. Not anymore. Now you walk with certainty, not to prove anything, but because you are anchored in the self, in the center, in your silent truth. And that truth doesn't need to shout. It's felt, it's sensed, and it reorganizes everything. This new frequency isn't loud. It doesn't attract through charm, but through depth. It doesn't seek approval. It commands respect without effort. And not because you've grown arrogant, but because now you know yourself. And when you know yourself, you don't beg for love. You don't plead for validation. You don't negotiate your presence. The shadow that used to sabotage you now serves you. It tells you where not to go, who not to engage with, what not to accept. You become selective, not out of pride, but for sanity. And that scares those who fed off your fragility. They won't get it. They'll call you cold, distant, difficult, but it doesn't matter. Because for the first time, you're not trying to convince anyone. You're simply living as someone who has chosen themselves, and the world feels it. Because the energy field of someone who's integrated cannot be invaded. It commands silence, it commands presence, it commands truth. So now I ask you, straight up, no sugarcoating. Are you ready for this? Ready to be misunderstood? Ready to give up conditional affection? Ready to face your own shadow without trying to escape the pain? Because this transcendence isn't romantic. It demands everything. It asks you to die symbolically, to dismantle the image you built to be accepted, to descend into your soul's basement and stay there until the ego finally stops screaming. But if you do it, if you endure the crossing, you'll never be the same. You'll walk in peace, not just on the outside, but from deep within. And that peace will guide your choices, your words, your connections. It will attract what vibrates at the same level. It will silence what used to wound you. And it will give you something no one can take, the sovereignty of your soul. The predator vanishes when there's no more fear to exploit. And the self, finally, reigns. Now that you know, there's no going back. Because when truth touches your skin, it burns, and what burns transforms. You can't blame others anymore, not after understanding that what exposes you is what you're still trying to hide. You don't attract chaos because you're weak. You attract chaos when you're fragmented. When you keep betraying yourself for connections that aren't even real. When you fake maturity just to avoid being abandoned. When you say, "I'm fine," just to dodge rejection. When you repress anger to seem spiritual, but the shadow doesn't forgive disguises. It will get revenge every time you try to silence it. It will show up in your relationships. It will appear in your patterns, your choices, your "this wasn't supposed to happen." It will keep attracting emotional predators until you stop living like prey. You have to decide, are you going to keep protecting the image of the evolved person? Or will you choose to be whole, even if that scares people? Even if they call you cold, rude, difficult, even if you lose everything that only stayed alive because you kept yourself small. Carl Jung said, everything repressed returns, and when it returns, it takes form. People, situations, addictions. And they'll keep haunting you until you stop running from yourself. This video wasn't just an explanation, it was a mirror. And mirrors don't hurt, they just reveal. If something in this touched you, write. Don't hold it in. Because sometimes a comment is just the first whisper of your soul finding its way back home. And if this message moved you, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, not just to follow another page, but to keep going with this process. This isn't the end. It's just the cut that comes before the rebirth.